How's it going, guys? Welcome back to part 5 of my K969 rebuild series. In this video, I'm mainly going to go over the rear low profile suspension mod that I did for the back end of the K969 to be able to fit my low profile P1 GTR body on there. But first, I'm gonna go over this this new metal upgrade kit that you can get. I found on AliExpress. That is a better version than the old school style metal upgrades like these, which were just garbage. So this kit is actually usable. It's pretty much what I've been waiting for them to make for I don't know how many years now. You know, if they finally came out with this new version, I think mainly for the 284010, the newer models that came out, you know, the successors to the K989 and the K969 versions. But yeah, they finally fixed all the problems that the old metal upgrade kit had, and this one's actually usable now. In part 4, I didn't know this kit was out yet, so I kind of just showed you what I had to do to make up for some of the parts that I didn't have yet. And I actually did have the lower swing arms already because I found those by themselves. But then later on I found out they had some more stuff, which, I mean, most of the stuff I already had. It's really the upper swing arms that I didn't have that they finally came out with, and that's really what I was looking for because I was still using the old ones that needed to use the screw that goes to the top of them. So what's nice about these upper swing arms is that they have one of these tiny little metal balls already built into it, and these are also adjustable. They do make a version that's just a solid piece that's not adjustable, but I wanted the adjustable ones obviously for camber and stuff, for drifting. So I went with this set that actually has adjustable ones. So that's really nice that they finally made these, because I've been wanting this version for a long time, and nobody ever made it, and then finally now they're coming out with them, mainly I think for the newer models to the successors of the K969, K989 models. So I just want to go over that first real quick, since I didn't get a chance to cover that in part 4, and I didn't actually have this yet. So now in part 5, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of that, and then I'm actually going to deconstruct the rear end, because I want to show you how I did this low profile suspension setup in the back here. And really the best way for me to do that is to just take it apart and just show you what I did along the way. That's probably the best way to do it. And I'm not really going to put it back together on camera. I'm just going to deconstruct it on camera, because you already see what it looks like when it's put together here. So I'll just, you know, unscrew everything and just show you any of the problems that I ran into along the way and what I used. And I'm also going to take it apart anyway, so I can put on these newer upper swing arms and, you know, some other stuff like that. So I just wanted to quickly cover that. And then just show you the body. I don't know if you haven't seen the body yet that I've been working on. This P1 GTR has a wide body kit on it, and I finally finished this guy, which is mainly the body that I wanted to run on my K969 body or chassis. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out. And the whole reason why I'm doing the low profile suspension is so I can fit this body on this car. So I can finally make this work. Because before, you would have a lot of interference, because the back end slopes down so low that you would hit the old suspension system that comes with the K969. So I had to basically reverse the setup and put the swing or the springs in the front here, because there's more room in this area than there is back here. So flipping that around definitely helped out, give me some space in here without any interference, and that pretty much fixed all the problems I was running into trying to make this thing fit. And of course the front end I already did earlier. I showed you a little bit of what I had to do for the front end, and I will do a whole video on the front end suspension where I'm going to take it all apart and show you how I put that together, and that'll probably be part 6 or part 7. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, so in this video I'm just going to mainly cover how I did this rear end, so you can see how low I can get it to be to where the body doesn't hit anywhere in there now. And I put the springs here, and they have enough room to where they clear. They're not in the way of any of the gears. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out. So I'll just take it apart and then show you bit by bit, you know, any of the problems I ran into and what I did to make that work. So let me put that down and then get this ready to show you what I did. I'm just gonna go over what's in this kit real quick before I move it out of the way. So you got these screws for the swing arms and other little ball heads and little pieces for the springs. So you get all that. I don't use these wheel hubs. These are for steering. If you need like a higher angle of steering, the only problem is this actually hits the wheel well when it rotates. So I can't actually use these for my setups, but you might be able to use these for your setup depending on what you're doing. But I never can use these because they're way too long. So I always end up using these for front and back. And they do have there are two different versions. You can see they're not perfectly center, so see how it's lower or higher depending on which way you rotate it. So you usually want it to be higher up, especially in the front, because I need it to be on the higher side. Otherwise, it'll start the bottom of the screw that hangs down here might start scraping the 3D print piece I have in there. So if I ever accidentally have it on the bottom, it would be too low and it would start to hit. So I always got to make sure that I have it on the higher end. So usually they come with one of each. I have gotten a pack before that was basically the same thing, to where it wasn't too like they were right. It was like basically they weren't mirrored. They were one of the same on each side, so I couldn't use it. I had to get another set so I can get a mirrored set. So just be careful of that if you ever do order some of those. Just check them. I don't need these. These are for the suspension system, the standard one where you put it right there on front and back, but obviously I'm not using it in the front and I'm definitely not going to be using it in the back either. So these are just kind of obsolete for what I'm using them for. And these are for the toe in and toe out, mainly for toe in if you're going to be doing drifting. That's what you want, but for the rear end, so you would put these right in that area, but for me I switched it around so it's for the back here. Can't really use these. I don't need one that's this long, but this is if you have like a plastic housing, then it can dig down deep into the plastic. It might be able to go down in the metal one too that deep, I'm not sure, but I think it's more for the plastic one, because that was a problem with the plastic housing, is if you only had one that was like this short, it would strip out. It wouldn't be able to anchor itself down very good in the plastic housing ones. So those come in the kit too. Not all the kits. Some kits are different. Some come with different pieces. You might have all these parts. You might have like some things are swapped out with different parts, but for this set, this is what I have. I usually use these for like my front suspension here. I modify these. I rip these out and put the smaller ball head in there, and because these are actually smaller than these. Unfortunately, I thought maybe I'd be able to use these for the front, but they're actually bigger. Let's see if I can do this. So they're longer and wider and everything. So it really is the length that's the problem for me, because I'm trying to keep camber up front and I need a little bit of room to be able to unscrew and screw this little guy to give me more camber. So if I get it closer or further away. So if I use one of these, the full length will go there. It won't give me much room to adjust because it'll be too long. So unfortunately, these I'm only going to be able to use in the back, not the front. So I have to keep using these for the front, but of course, like I said, I got to rip out the ball and put one of these smaller ones in that are lower profile. So yeah, so I'll cover that more in the next part. So yeah, you get two of these, mainly for rear toe in or out. And then these are the upper swing arms, the newer versions. Sometimes they have a different style one here. That's what I had on this one, which are smaller on this old version, and I had to actually put a little washer there to make up for some of the extra space. But this one should be wide enough to where it'll just drop in I think the exact same size of the space there. So, and then now of course I have small little ball cup in here. Instead of having to use the old school setup, we have to put a screw through it. Which, I mean, I made it work. It works. And I use one of these little flat screw heads here, so it doesn't really stick up too high. But I'd rather have nothing sticking up from above there like the other version, so I will swap these out to the new one. And hopefully they have a good enough range of motion. If for any reason these don't have enough range of motion, I can just use a Dremel and then Dremel, you know, a little bit of space out here or a little bit of space out there, and that'll actually give me more range either direction I need it to go. So it's not the end of the world, because that's what I had to do with these lower swing arms. I'll probably show you once I get further into taking this apart, but I Dremeled, let's see. I Dremeled this area right here, and that actually gave me enough room for it to lean back more to where I can get the suspension to go down as far as I need it to. You might not need it to go down as far as I do, so you might be fine with just leaving it the way it is. But for me, I had to get a little bit more of a lean back angle to it, so I had to just Dremel out a little bit of material there. It wasn't that hard, it really wasn't that bad. Let's see, I used the, see if I can find the Dremel tip. Yeah, I used this little Dremel tip, and I just sat there and just grinded away that material just a little bit. And then once I saw how far back I needed it to lean, I would stop. So I didn't really dig too deep. I just dug enough of the material there to get it to lean the direction I need. And I might Dremel off a little bit of this material here to kind of like flatten that out. Even though it doesn't scrape along the ground or anything, it's up high enough to where it clears. I might just do that anyway, just to make sure that that doesn't get too close to the ground. But overall, like, these are way better than the other metal upgrade that they had. Yeah. And they're better than the plastic. I mean, I used the plastic for a long time. I like the plastic, but over time they do start to wear out. And for how much angle I needed them to lean, I would actually have to drill out a lot of material here on these as well, depending on what side I needed it to do. So here's a better angle. So I'd have to like clear out some of the material there to get the ball head to lean back more. And then if I went too far, it would start to get too loose where the ball head would pop out easier. So I would rather have it metal since it's more durable. And this is actually way more trustworthy because these ball heads don't come out at all. It doesn't pop out. It won't accidentally pop out if I go too high or too low. It stays in there and it has plenty of range of motion, and it's very easy to move. Doesn't stick or anything. It doesn't get like bound up or nothing. It's exactly what I wish they would have made from the beginning, instead of wasting our time with this version that was not usable. I mean, you could try to Dremel out and try to get it to lean, but then you have a screw head hanging out the bottom, and it was just a terrible design. So I'm glad they finally came out with this version, because this is way better. So that's what I've done so far. I'm going to do it to the front as well. The only problem is in the front, I have to eat away some of the material here and here, like I mentioned in the last part, to make it fit, because when the wheels turn 90 degrees, they almost start to hit the swing arm. And I kind of messed up the first two set that I was doing, because I use a grinder wheel, and the grinder wheel is not very good because it eventually can start heating up the metal too much to where it will start to warp the shape, and really was beating it up. So I'm gonna have to actually use a cutting wheel on my Dremel to do it, which I was trying to avoid doing, but I'm gonna have to do it that way if I wanna do this right, because the grinder wheel was just too aggressive at grinding away the material. So one of them broke, and this one's still kind of usable, but I don't really like how that came out, so I had to get a new set. And then I'm going to have to use my Dremel to cut off this material here and here. And that's another reason why I got a new set, is because I really needed to get another set of these swing arms to do the front. But since I found these upper swing arms in a kit, I said, why not? And I just got the whole kit so I could get these. I haven't seen these by themselves yet. Otherwise, I probably would have just bought these by themselves and another set. They said, I really don't need any of this, but I'm debating on making a second one of these for racing. Since I have this one for drifting, I'm gonna make the same exact setup, low profile, to fit, you know, my racing bodies and stuff on, but I'm gonna have a brushless setup on 2S for racing. That basically would be competing with the MR03s from my Kyosho MR03. which would be faster and everything. And I want to see, I kind of want to see if I can make it work on like being able to drive it on concrete and everything, you know, smooth concrete, of course, because these guys are so low profile. But yeah, one I can kind of beat up more than my MR03 is just, you know, mainly plastic and this and that, and you really can't drive that thing on any other surface than like, you know, a really nice floor or carpet or foam, you know. So I want to build pretty much a basher little race car that I can drive on concrete. That's also going to be 2S and brushless as well with the low profile bodies, and I'll probably get a couple mini Z bodies that I'll make that are nice, but I'm not gonna really care if I mess up that much. So I'm not gonna make them as nice as, like, you know, these are kind of like shelf queens. So like this 12C GT3 body is more of a basher body, so I don't really care if it gets too messed up, but I might get like one more 12C GT3, maybe another P1 GTR, whatever, and just do like a half-ass paint job on them that I can just kind of drive around on concrete, and I won't care if I scratch them up or beat them up or anything. So that's what I might do here in the near future. Once I'm done with this build, I might actually, I have enough parts to almost do half of another one, so I might as well just get the other pieces that I need, and then I can also go over how much it costs to get all these little kits and put together one of these from scratch without having to buy like a K969, K989, or like 284010, whatever, and then trying to upgrade that. I might just see how much it costs to just build everything from scratch if you just bought the chassis, the metal upgrades, you know, and everything. It's going to be rear-wheel drive as well. I'm not going to do an all-wheel drive version. It's going to be rear-wheel drive. I'm not going to need the same amount of steering on that one as I do this one, but I will need to do the low-profile front suspension setup though for the bodies. So I'll have to do something similar to this, but I'm not going to need it to go 90 degrees. I just need it to be low enough and then just turn normal enough for a race car. So that's a whole nother project I'm going to go over once I'm done with this K969 rebuild. So yeah, and then these springs are great, at least compared to like the plastic ones that you get. They're pretty good, especially if you spray like a little bit of lube on that metal bar in there. It'll slide pretty smooth. But if you do have them bind, they do get hard to compress. If you have any binding on the top and bottom here, they have to be perfectly straight, and they'll be fine if you keep them straight. But if you have them kind of bending a little bit, it'll definitely scrape the metal together. So it'll still compress, but it's not as like smooth as it is if you just keep them perfectly centered. Because I've had it to where I had it kind of putting pressure on the bottom swing arm was putting pressure on it, and then it would scrape as it's going up, and it would kind of give it a little bit of friction that I don't want there. So luckily with this setup it's perfectly straight. It was mainly with the plastic area where the screw goes in, and then there's a lot of slop and movement down here in the swing arm, like to the sides and this and that would not really help line up this spring to keep it straight. It would kind of bend it a little bit to where it would scrape, and then, you know, these springs wouldn't be able to work as well as they would if they were perfectly centered. So these are good. I am using different springs than the ones that come with them. I had a different set of shocks that I also had to have stronger, a little bit thicker springs, because I wanted to stiffen up the rear end, so I just swapped out those springs. So you don't have to do that. You can use the stock ones if you want, but if you want stronger springs, you know, it's something you could do. And then you're supposed to tighten this little part here, if I can get it to do it. If you want to tighten up the tension, you can just tighten that down, and then it'll bring the spring down like that, and that'll actually make the spring tension much stronger. So if you want to stiffen up the rear end, you just screw this down and tighten up that spring. So that's what you gotta do if you ever get these springs. Get those out of the way. So yeah, I'm gonna throw 2 of these in on the rear end, and then I gotta Dremel 2 of these to fit for the front end here and here. So that's what I'll do after I show you the whole rear end here. I just wanted to get those out of the way. Now I had to make a 3D print here to get these suspension pieces to be able to have somewhere to mount to. And here's like the prototype that I I was making. It's got 2 screw holes to go in to where those screw holes would go on the top of the housing for the little carbon fiber piece that goes along the top there. And then I had to have it come out wide enough to where these line up with the mounting underneath. I went through a couple different variations of this prototype here. You can see I actually shaved some material off here, made it a little bit lower for those screws, and this one I had it just one big block, but I took away some material so it's even lower when I put the screws in. But yeah, it's pretty basic. You just 2 screws, just enough room for that carbon fiber plate that runs along the top here, just the width of it. Let's see some measurements. I think it was 13 millimeter or 14. Let's see. So yeah, about 13 millimeter width in between there. And then the screws there are about, I think, 8 millimeter apart. Sorry, I use this old shitty ruler, but it works. So it's 8 millimeters apart there for the distance between the screws. And then for the mounting, I made them about 28 millimeters apart. And then I guess, let's see what kind of height I got going here. About 5 millimeters tall in some areas, like, you know, like right here, about 5 millimeters. I just made it thick enough to where I could put a screw through it, and it's got enough material to where it won't bend or snap or anything when I get the tension from the spring on there. And about 5 millimeters of material was strong enough. This is just normal PLA. It's black silk PLA material, so it's nothing special. This stuff's pretty strong though for PLA. It's not too easy to snap. I mean, you definitely can break it if you bend hard enough, but for the strength of these little springs, it's fine. But yeah, so I put that right there, and once I screw the 2 screws down, it holds it in place, and then I got to run a screw through it right there. So I put little 1.5 to 2 millimeter size hole through it, so I can get a 2 millimeter size screw through there, and the length varies. I didn't really have one that was the perfect length, so it's a little bit longer than what I needed, but let's see, the length of the screw is about 16 to 17 millimeters long. So like you're gonna need like a 14 to 18 size length of a screw through here would be good. You don't want it to be too long so you have a lot of it sticking out the back. But then again, you can also make this wider too in this part of the 3D print. I just made it, I think, let's see how long that is. About 5 millimeters, so like 5 millimeter by 5 millimeter. And I figured that would be enough material to hold these screws in place for the springs. And it's working out pretty good so far, so. So that was like the last part I had to figure out once I put everything together, is figuring out how to mount these springs to something, since there's nothing I can use other than like something I have to make off a 3D printer to make this work. Obviously you don't have to do it this way like I'm doing it. It's just, this is the only way I can make this work to fit this body on here. Like, I did have the other setup to where I had the spring going to the back here. If you watch my first original video, I was using the plastic housing, and here's the old plastic housing. But I had to shave away a lot of material here, and then I had to shave down some back here because I had to mount it, because I couldn't mount it through these holes anymore because they would be interfering with the springs. So I made a new hole that would mount this together to close these 2 pieces together, you know. So that's how I made that work. And then I had the screw that goes through the hole, the swing arm on top here would also connect to the spring. So it would go through there. And that worked, but there, like I said, there's a little bit of binding going on, because like the swing arms, these plastic swing arms, I mean, as good as they are, they would have a lot of like sideways wiggle to them, wear and tear. And this is also, the 3D print's not perfect and everything as well. Once I drill out the hole and it gets worn out over time, there's a little bit of extra movement in there that I don't need. And it would put a lot of, the spring would be strong enough to put a lot of pressure, start pulling the swing arm kind of at like a weird cockeyed like angle to where it would put a lot of pressure on it. That's why I like using the metal ones, because the metal ones are sturdy and strong and can handle the pressure of the springs. So that's why I wanted to switch all this out to metal to just strengthen this all up so I'm not dealing with the issues I was having with the plastic housing. So yeah, this was the original design I had going with the original housing. And I did get a second housing, but this is one for 284010, while this one is the original one that came with the K969, and they're not compatible because the bearing sizes are different on the new 284110 or 010, whatever it's called. And to tell the difference between the new one and the old version, so the old versions for the K969 will have a number 2 on top of the housing. So you know that's the old version. As I just found all this out. Put that back together. And the new version for the 284010 will have a Y1 at the top of the housing. And the difference is in this area here where the bearings go. There's actually different size bearings I use between the two models. They look almost exactly the same to the naked eye. So if you're not paying attention when you buy these things, like they won't fit. Like I couldn't use this unless I shaved away material to make those old bearings fit in here, which is actually what I had to do with the metal housing. I'll have to go over that. But these plastic ones, when I bought this, it did say that this was for the 284010, and I really wasn't paying attention because it also said K969 K989, but I should have paid a little bit more attention to see that it's not an exact drop-in as the old K969 one is. But you can make it work like I ended up having to do it. But this one, the metal housing that I got, did not say that this was for the 284010. It just said K989, K969, and whatever. It didn't specify that this won't work with the old bearings. This one's made for the new bearings. So there's no labeling anywhere when I bought this that said this is not gonna work with the old stuff. So I had to figure that one out the hard way with the metal one. But the plastic housing did say on the description that this won't work with the older bearings. So I wasn't paying attention with this one, but even if I was paying attention with this housing, there was nowhere on there that said this one wasn't going to work with the old school stuff. So that's something to be aware of if you're gonna buy any of these housings, the metal or plastic, is pay attention if it's gonna need the new bearings for the 284010 or if it's gonna be the old school K989, K969 model. So that's something to be aware of if you're gonna buy any of these upgrade parts. All right, so now that I covered all that, let me just start taking some stuff apart here. So these two screws are what holds this together. So I don't really need to take them all the way off. I can just loosen them up to where they let go. It's really easy. I like how easy it is to mount this, just 2 screws. All right, then let me get this top plate out of the way. So yeah, so it just goes in those 2 middle holes up there. These didn't line up perfectly with the holes, so I had to Dremel out. I had to Dremel out a little bit more space on them for them to line up with these 2 little pegs, and then to also line up with the 2 holes there. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but I had to ream these out a little bit bigger so that everything would fit right without having too much pressure. So that's one thing. See the holes up here, how small those are compared to these 2. These are the 2 that I'm using. So I had to Dremel those out to make them bigger because they were as small as this hole up here was. So that's something to be aware of if you're gonna do any of these mods, is you might have to do a little bit of Dremel work. So yeah, that's how this is held together. Let's see if I can take these out of the way now. All right, I use these lock nuts here to hold these springs in place. All right, so now I can just pull this apart. I'll leave those on there. But yeah, that's all I needed to design to make a better mount than, say, like what these things are that come with the kits. Like, I can't use these, and unfortunately I can't modify these either to work, so that's why I had to make this whole design from scratch, which I try to keep it as simplistic as possible and as low profile as possible, because that's the biggest reason why I'm doing this. I needed to make this as low profile as I possibly could, and this actually worked out pretty well. So that's how I did that. I don't really have any 3D print files to give to anybody. I don't have an account. I don't have that set up. I just make these on Tinkercad and then just load them into Cura and slice them, and then I print them out. So that's why I was trying to give you an idea of the measurements and what it looks like, so you can kind of get an idea. If you want to make one yourself, you can just kind of copy what I did. See, I just made it to where it could fit on the sides of this thing, just fit right over that, and then the screws go right into those holes. And then once you tighten these two screws down, it holds the whole thing down nice and taut and straight. And then you have to put screws through these sides here to mount the springs on, and then that's all you have to do for the upper springs. All right, so I'll put that off to the side for now. Get this out of the way. Okay, so now that those are out of the way, there's multiple different things I had to kind of mess with to get everything to run smoothly, like to get these the wheels and everything to spin nice and smooth with the gears. I did notice that the housing was putting a little bit of pressure on the gears to where it wasn't keeping the gear straight. It would kind of have it a little bit bent, which would cause it to bind up. And to remedy that, I had to do a couple different things to make it work. So one of the things I had to do is put a tiny little spacer, which I'll do when I take it apart, just like a little piece of cardboard right underneath the housing there, to kind of lift the front of the housing up just a tad to line up here, because this needed to line up perfectly straight with the gear in there. It's hard to get this thing to focus, but yeah, if this metal housing area isn't perfectly like flush or parallel with the gear, if it's kind of cocked up or down, then it'll cause binding to where this gear won't be able to move freely, with the gear that's on the motor. So that's something I had to figure out. But yeah, all I had to do was just put a tiny little piece of cardboard, maybe like 1/2 millimeter underneath there, so when I tighten down the screws, when it wants to pull the housing down, it would pull it down, but it would have that little bit there to keep it from going down too far to put any binding pressure on this gear. So that's something I had to figure out, with trial and error as I was putting this together, to make these metal gears and everything perfectly straight, lined up, so they can work with the diff and not get any binding of any kinds. You can hear it, it's good now. Like, that's how it should sound when you're trying to rotate the tires front or back. It shouldn't be getting bound up, because it would get really tight and it would get bound up if it would put too much pressure. Because what would happen is the diff inside would start to pull the tiny little gear that's in there down, and then it would get stuck and get taut on it because there's a little bit too much downward motion instead of it being perfectly straight like it's supposed to. So that's something I figured out as I was putting it all together, and that's what I did to fix it. All right, so I'm gonna take the whole housing rear end off. So I'm just using some small little countersunk screws to hold the bottom piece together. And there's these little plastic pieces that came with the original housing, because there's like that empty space in there for if you use this piece in the front. It's because of this piece for when you're putting the mounting for the front lip. That it just has that open space in there. So I use the little plastic pieces that come with the original. Sorry, I dropped it. All right. So these little pieces, I just repurposed those. because they have to line up with those little pegs, and then you put the screw through the other hole. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this apart now. There. So yeah, if the gear was like tilted forward or tilted back like this, it would put a lot of binding on the diff and the gear inside the housing there, so it wouldn't be able to. So yeah, if it was tilted this way or that way, it would not work correctly. It needs to be perfectly straight and lined up with the housing, because of the better angle there. So yeah, it can't be like this or that. It has to be perfectly straight. It's even just a little bit. If it's like a millimeter off, that's all it takes to really bind up this whole setup. So you just got to figure that out. And then it should, once you get it straight, it should be able to just turn the wheels no problem like this. All right, I'm gonna take this one out. Or actually, I'll have to leave that in there and just take the top plate apart. So I have some tiny little countersunk screws just holding the top plate and bottom plate together here. Nothing fancy. And technically this is where you would put the toe in and out, which there's actually more room in here for this setup of this part here. There's actually less room in the back here than there is in the front. So I had to like make sure that I shaved a little bit of material off on this little guy, so it doesn't, rub or get snagged on the housing too much. I barely even had to scrape any off. It almost worked without messing with it, but I just grinded off a little bit more material, so there's nothing getting like snagged on there. So, but there's more room in the front than there is in the back. So when I switched this whole setup around, I found out that like I don't have the same kind of room back here as I do in the front for the toe. So that's something to be aware of if you even do anything like I'm doing here. You might not need to flip it around, so you won't have to worry about that. Oh. Yeah, of course everything's gonna fall apart while I'm doing this. It's hard to do this on camera. So these are what's holding the top and bottom plate together right now. Once I take these two screws out, I can take the top plate out, and also the upper swing arms are still holding it together too, to be honest. So I would just move these out of the way. But you can see how these can change toe in, toe out by adjusting the length here. And usually you'd make them shorter if they were in the front to bring the toe in, but on this setup, you have to make them a lot longer to make it go toe in because it's reversed. So I need to make sure there's enough, I have a long enough screw to be able to, bridge the gap between these two pieces, because I made this one from scratch because it has a lot more range of motion. I really can't get these to work on the bottom here on this version, on this side, because they don't have enough range of motion to go all the way down for how far I have the suspension going. So I found these things on AliExpress a long time ago, and they have a M2 hole for like M2 size screws to go in there. But this this ball head that's in here moves around a lot. You have a lot of range of motion with that ball head. So I just cut it obviously down. I cut it down real short, just drilled a little bit of a hole in there to be able to screw into, and I use that. And that actually is all I need to be able to get the up and down range that I need on the bottom half here. Like you can get away with these at the top here, but at the bottom that goes down the furthest is where you need the most angle. You can see how high up the angle has to go, or at least how much it gives me. So it's hard to do this. Let's see. So yeah, see, it's got a good range of motion to where I can make that work. So that's why I use those on that part there. And these are what I will be swapping out with. So these worked. They had enough range of motion for the top, but you couldn't use this, the other ones for the bottom that use the screw. So I have to use a screw that goes through them. Let's see. Just like these, these bottom ones, I can't use these, but you can make the top ones work. So and then you can screw them on or off to give you more camber on the rear wheels here. I don't really want too much camber on the back. I just want just a slight bit of camber, so I have them all the way screwed in, and that actually gives me just a little bit of camber, and that's all I really want. I don't need any more than that on the rear. But that's what I would do if I wanted to adjust the camber. You need to have adjustable ones. And luckily this new version is adjustable, so I can play around with that any which way I want. But I'm curious to see if this will definitely be a good replacement for that. It should be. I like these much better. If they work, this is definitely the way to go. I'm going to take out this little threaded piece that's in there, and I'm going to put the little piece that I have inside here, which is just an M2 screw that's been cut down, and I'll just put that in there so I can tighten it all the way down and get rid of that gap and that piece that's in there. So I'll do that, and that should be able to even give me more toe if I want it, but I probably won't run any more toe than what I ever have right now. So, all right. And that's basically it that's holding it together. Oh yeah, I had to put a little bit of tape on the inside here where you put the bearing for the gears, because there was a little bit of slop that was in there, so the little bearing that would go in there would have a little bit of room to move around in there, and you don't want that. So I had to put a little bit of tape in the top part of the housing and the bottom part of the housing to keep that bearing nice and pinned in there from moving, and also to center it, because if there was a little bit of slop, the bearing would drop down just like 1/2 millimeter, and that's also what would make this gear either go this way or that way. And if it's not perfectly straight, if it's like this, the diff is going to bind up on it, or if it's like that, same thing, diff's going to bind up, so it has to be perfectly straight. So putting a little bit of cushion, with some electrical tape or any kind of tape, whatever, just a little bit in the top part where the bearing goes, and also down in there where the bottom part of the bearing goes. That'll help keep that bearing in place, especially when you tighten the two pieces together and sandwich it down, it stays centered. So I had to do that to fix that problem, because like I said, I was getting a little bit of binding going on with the diff. And I definitely like this diff better than the other shitty aftermarket ones that I was using before, which those are they're doable, it'll work, but this one's way better. So I'm happy with this rear rigid axle, and I can adjust this gear to go further or back depending on what I want. So I can take out little washers here, and I can actually shift that around, which is nice to have that ability to be able to adjust it. If it's too tight here, I can take a washer away. And then obviously if it's too far away, I keep adding washers until the teeth line up perfectly. So I really like that ability with these. And it also has there's tiny little washer here. You can't really see very well, because sometimes there's a little bit of sloppy movement left to right in here. So it's nice that they come with a tiny little washer on both sides that I can take away or add to kind of get rid of that movement that you might get, so it's not rocking back and forth. Because if it starts rocking away from the gear, then the teeth might not actually make contact with each other, and then it starts stripping the teeth because they're too far away from each other. Because this is shifting back and forth too much, because there's too much wiggle room in there. Now, a couple of things I had to Dremel to make room for everything. I did have to Dremel a little bit of material here for the spring, so when it goes down, the spring has enough room to be able to sit in there without getting bound up on the swing arm. So I just shaved away a little bit of material there. It wasn't that hard. I just took my little grinder ball, and just ate away a little bit of material, and that fixed that problem. And then the housings. Yeah, so since I got the wrong housing, this one doesn't work with the old bearings for the K969 K989. I had to just sit there and Dremel away material, only like 1/2 millimeter on each side, so where it's almost like a full millimeter of material total to get rid of, to make these old bearings fit in this new housing. So that was probably the biggest pain in the ass. I guess if I would have bought some bearings that were for the 284010, I wouldn't have had to do this, but I didn't realize this until after I got the housing. And all I had with me was the old K969 bearings. So I don't know if they changed the design because maybe they were getting some flack from Kyosho, because I think the Kyosho bearings are the same size, they fit, and people could just drop them in and out of their, you know, WLToys cars. So maybe they got into some kind of, you know, legal problems with them, so they decided to change the design. And of course they're only going to change the design by like making the bearing a millimeter different in size, which just screws up everything if you want to, you know, try to make any of your old parts fit with the new parts, vice versa, you know. So that was pretty much annoying to find out the hard way, is that yeah, you can't use the old bearings with the new housings, or you know, vice versa, you can't do that. So I had to just grind out material to make these old bearings fit in here. So you can see that didn't look like a lot of fun, because it wasn't. But I just took, let's see, this Dremel tip. I just sat here and I just kept grinding away on each side. First I did the sides, because it seemed like all I needed to do was just grind a little bit here and here to get it to go in. But then once I tried to push it in, it still wouldn't reach to the bottom, so I had to grind all the way down the bottom too a little bit. And then eventually I just kept doing that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until I got to sit down as far as I needed it to. And then same with the bottom, I had to do the same thing. So, yep. But after you do that, you can get these old bearings to fit. So, I mean, yeah, you can use this new housing with the old bearings if you want to sit here and Dremel them like I did. Otherwise, just buy the new bearings with the new housing, or try to get the old housing if you still have the old bearings, you know. So you just can't mix and match them that way. So just giving you a heads up now, so you don't have to do what I had to do. Which, yeah, it wasn't fun. It really didn't take me that long. It took me like 15-20 minutes or so to just Dremel all four and get that done. So it's not like this was that bad, but it's like, obviously it's work that you don't want to do if you can avoid it. All right, so let me just take one of these wheels off so I can show you the little bit of material I grinded away. Okay, so you can see I grinded away a little bit of material right there, so this could lean back. See how much it leans back further than it did without, you know, me taking away that material. So let's see. All right, so you can see the difference in how far it leans. Like I'm pushing this one back here as far back as it'll go, and then you can see the difference with the one that I did grind. I can go all the way back there. So that's what I needed to make sure I have enough room for the suspension to be able to push the wheels all the way down as far as I need them to go. It might be too far for your setup. For my setup, I needed it to go down that far. So you might be able to get away with the stock, you know, distance that might work for yours. But if you feel like you're not getting the full range you need, all you have to do is just grind away that material right there, just a little bit of it. It really wasn't that hard. It took me not even like a couple minutes to do. You don't go too far. You don't need to go too crazy with it. Just eat away a little bit of that material right in there. I like an angle, so I did it at an angle like this, and just eat away that material until you get it to lean in as far as you needed to. And I pretty much just guessed and stopped right there, and that was exactly where I needed to stop. So that worked out for me. So yeah, this is just something you need to do. Just take away a little bit of material and test it. If you need to go further, take away a little bit more material, then test it until you get it to where you like it. And then you obviously have to do it on both sides. I'm gonna have to do it to the ones I'm gonna do in the front. Definitely gonna have to do it to these. Let's see. I almost had that done until I screwed these up with using the grinder wheel, but yeah. So if you want to, like, if you're gonna have like this kind of angle on your tires, on your wheels, and your front end, you're definitely gonna need to shave away material so they can fit there. without getting hit by the wheel, because if you use a stock size, it'll actually hit the swing arm, especially if you hit the side with where the little screw goes. This little piece that sticks out will definitely hit it, so it'll stop like right there, won't be able to go all the way. So that's why I have to slim those down to make it work. But after I'm done with that, I mean, this build is pretty much done, and then I have to just put the electronics on. And then once I put the electronics on, I can start getting to test driving. There's one thing I still haven't decided on yet. I need to get a gyro, and I haven't decided on which one I want to get. I didn't want to spend too much money on it, but really when it comes to gyros, it's like you get what you pay for. So I might end up getting one of those $40 versions that are really nice, just to make sure that it works right. Otherwise, if I get one that's like in the $20 range, might be good, might not. I mean, DasMikro has one that is in the $20 range that I don't know if it's really going to do as much as like the one. There's a new one from GT55 Racing, and then the what is it, the AFRC one, I think is like 40 bucks. That one looks pretty good, the 3.5 version. I might end up getting that one, but it's around 40 bucks. So, you know, if I get like one that's between 20 and 30, like, is that worth it? I might as well just buy the $40 version and just know I'm gonna get a really good one. But overall, that's the only thing I need that's left to add on here when it comes to electronics. I have the ESC and the receiver and all that stuff. I'm not gonna use the gyro that's built into the RadioLink receiver, because I've already watched videos on that gyro and it's absolute garbage. So I'm not even gonna waste my time trying to make that one work. I'm just gonna get an aftermarket gyro, and then once I have that on here and I install it all, this thing is ready to start driving, and then start showing off this body. And of course I have some other bodies I'm gonna be working on too that I have body kits for, like the R35 and R34, 12C GT3, and what was the other one? Supra. So yeah, I have definitely some other bodies I will be working on putting body kits on. But the Skylines won't fit this though. The Skylines will only fit my MA020, but the 12C GT3 and of course the P1 GTR are 98mm and they're wide. So those bodies will fit this setup, no problem. And of course, I was saying that I'll make a second one of these down the road here, almost the same exact way, but for racing. And then I can run these bodies as well on that racing setup. So that'll be later after I'm done with all this, and then I have, like I said, half the parts already, so I might as well just make a second one that's tailored towards racing, and then I keep this one for drifting. And that's it. That's pretty much all I'm going to do for these K969/284010 WLToys cars, you know. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'm going to have to put all this back together, and then I'll, you know, show it all back together in part 6, part 7. But I just wanted to tear it all down, give you an idea of what hassle I had to go through when it came to putting any of these parts together to make this work. But as you can see, you know, there's a little bit of work, but once it's all put together and done, I can fit, you know, a low profile body like this back there, no problem, which I haven't seen anybody fit something as low as like a P1 GTR on any K969, K989, 28401, any of those bodies. I haven't seen anybody do it yet. So I just wanted to see if I can make it work, and so far it is. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something. I know this one's pretty long, but I mean, it just takes time to deconstruct everything and then go through every little detail what I had to do to make this work. But it didn't take me that long to put together. I mean, once I actually sat down and did it, probably like an hour or two of like work, if that. But just kind of like just sitting around and thinking of what I was going to do and how I was going to do it probably took more time than the actual hands-on work. So but yeah, as you can see, it's doable. I might make a couple changes along the way, and if I do, I'll mention those in the next parts. But overall, I'm happy with how this is coming out. So hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next part.